And we're live. Hi, this is Paulo, and today I'm going to speak with my friend Pedro Bouça, who was recently in France for the Angouleme Comics Festival, which is the second biggest comic book festival in the world after the Lucca Festival in Italy, and takes care of comic books a lot better than any Comic Con branded event in the United States. How are you, Pedro?
That's for sure. Angouleme is a true comics festival who actually is just about comics. There are no unemployed actors. There is no video games, nothing. Pretty much just comics and a bit of merchandise related to comics, which is relegated to a specific place.
Excellent. And one thing that we have in European comics festivals that you don't have in the United States is art exhibits. And even though this festival is in France, they recognize that comics from all over the world are important, and even United States, even comics from the United States, American comics are celebrated in the Angoulême Festival. And the two biggest exhibits this year, they were about American comics. Can you tell us a little bit about what you saw?
Of course. First, the important thing to say is every year in Angoulême, they gave away a lot of prizes, a dozen or so, not Eisners, which are 40 every year, but a certain amount of prizes. The most important is the Grand Prix d'Angoulême, which is given to a veteran creator for all his career. It's a career award. Last year, the winner was Richard Corben, an American. So this year, he is the president of the festival, which is more of let's say symbolic post, but he gets to make a large exhibition of his work. And it was quite a large one. It took part of the Angoulême Museum, not the Comics Museum, the traditional museum, which has every festival, he gives a few of his exhibition halls to expositions. And he had there an enormous collection of originals from his very first fanzine works to the most recent Hellboy pages, Luke Cage pages, the work he's doing right now. Among the ones that were there, most of his representative works. There were his paintings, there were pages from his most important comics. I saw the first 6 or so pages of them, which is quite significant. And so on. It occupied so much space that some of the originals had to go in the middle of the regular exhibitions. In the African wing of the museum, there were Richard Corben originals in the stands among the African objects. The other large American comics-centered exposition was the Batman one. Batman is having his 18th birthday this year. He was created in 1939. So Angoulême gave him an enormous exhibition on the Mediatek in the I think what would be the word for Mediatek in English? Do you have any idea? Hello, Paulo?
Yeah, I think that describes it well. It's not a library, but it aggregates several types of media that you can watch or rent, including tapes and movies, as well as books.
Okay. There it was the large exhibition, which was divided in several smaller ones. The first were the, for lack of a better word, the story exhibitions. There was a place which was the crime alley, which was decorated with garbage dumpsters and the silhouette of Bruce Wayne's parents on the ground with Rose there and police line do not pass band. And in the walls there were reproductions of pages showing his origin. Then following one centered on the Wayne Manor, which included a large display that reproduced the scene on Batman Year One with the bat going through the window. But it was all scenography with Bruce Wayne's desk and all such. Followed to the Batcave. There was a quite magnificent display of the Batcave with monitors everywhere and a display with Batman's costume.
Yeah, right now I think we should explain that when they in Europe, when we have these exhibits, it's not just displaying the art pages. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure the environment is correct, and they try to make things that are part of that comic book. They try to make it into reality, having a three-dimensional environment that you go through at the same time that you're looking at the art pages.
Indeed, as I said, that first part had no originals. It just reproduced representative moments explaining the origin and history of Batman in comic, not his out of comics history, but his in comics history. After the Batcave, there was a wing for Arkham Asylum with several cells, each one for a villain. The Scarecrow, Two-Face. Catwoman wasn't there. Catwoman had a small place for her because she's not just a villain, but Batman's main girlfriend, because it's the one that he was close for most of his career. Also, there was a very nice reproduction of the Joker's cell, which had a large glass pan and inside a Joker statue. And outside a desk with Dr. Harley Quinn's computer and uniform. So it was real nice. That was very nice piece of scenography. When you pass that, you go to the history, the in-comics history itself, which were panels explaining the history of Batman on each decade, main artists, main stories, and things like that, which had around then lots of original art expositions. Not much from the 40s and 50s, you can imagine. Those are very, very rare, but there was a lot of New Adams, that it had the legendary Gina Paro cover where a terrorist is pointing his machine gun to him, finish the cover, Aparo, either Rock kills Batman or I kill you. The best Batman cover, I will say, in which Batman does not appear.
I'm looking at your Facebook page here, and you took pictures from the exhibits. I'm going to see if I can screen share some of the pictures that you took, so that people can see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like the Batcave computers. Let's see if I can put everything in the options.
Put links on the video later if it be.
Okay, I think I can. All right. And share screen.
Anyway, while we'll do that, let me see if I can. Oh yeah, that's the small exhibition catalog. Oh yeah, that's
okay. I got the
photo.
Yeah, this is the Batcave.
Yeah, and you can see behind it a panel reproducing Jim Lee's famous Batcave artwork, the Batman costume display. Get the Arkham Asylum pictures; they are very nice. Forward.
Okay, this is piece.
Yeah,
Batman memorabilia. Okay, this is art from Robin's death, Jason Todd.
Yeah, those are page reproductions. This is a small Gotham City display which reproduced the opening of the legendary cartoon.
Let me see if I can go straight to the Arkham Asylum.
You were already at Arkham Asylum when you left, to be fair. That was the beginning of Arkham Asylum.
Yeah. This is the entrance to
Arkham Asylum. Lighting is not always great. You can put a flash there because it could damage the artwork.
Of course, but it is Arkham Asylum. It's not exactly the most welcoming medical facility.
Yeah, but there was 1 million people, so it was popular. That's the Scarecrow cell.
That's the Riddler. There's the hat. And Two-Face. Nice team sale art there. Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze with a snow globe with his wife's image. Poison Ivy.
Yeah. And the Joker. See, this is very good. This is the art appreciation that they usually don't have in American conventions when it's all about the dealers selling old comics, and there's usually panels, but they don't show the art. There's no appreciation of the art form.
Yeah, this is Dr. Harley Quinn's desk, which I mentioned.
Yeah.
And her lab coat.
It is.
Yeah, you can see the reproductions. I didn't photo them because they were fake reproductions and they weren't that interesting. And here is the art, is the character history crawl, publication history, so to say. You see on the 50s, they mentioned the Batman, the Superman of Planet X, which is the legendary Zur-En-Arrh story.
The 60s with the new visuals.
Yeah, that's the 60s. What's the name? Carmine Infantino Batman. 70s. Neil Adams. You can't run from Neil Adams in the 70s. He's the most representative Batman artist. Frank Miller in the 80s. The cartoon version in the 90s. Paul Dini's.
Because even though this is not strictly created for the comic books, Paul Dini's version helped introduce Batman to a new generation of fans through the animated series. And ultimately, although the visual looks cartoony, it's also dark enough to portray the real Batman on television.
those are very solid visuals. At the time the cartoon was on, there was a very good comic that created new cartoon style comic stories drawn first by Mike Parobek, which died very young, and later by Ty Templeton. I'm not sure most of those stories. The 2000s Batman with Jim Lee.
And the current one.
Right, current 2010s, which is, I would say, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo. I haven't yet seen the most recent version by Tom King. Who draws Tom King's Batman?
It's Mitch Gerads. It was him on. No, he was on Mr. Miracle. I'm really not sure. One thing that kind of annoys me with the 2010 Batman, and he usually on all the DC universe redesigns after New 52 and even now with a Rebirth, is that there were unnecessary changes to their details. So I'm not really sure that a lot of those little changes improve the original look or even the 60s redesign or on the 80s, because there was a continuity between them, and this ones are. It looks like they're just trying to design for potential TV and movie uses. Like it's not a complete product.
To be fair, that's pretty much what the American comics are doing nowadays. As they say, the tail is wagging the dog. Comics now are a subsidiary of the audiovisual versions. I don't really like it, but what can we say? Money is there.
Yeah.
Here is the exposition catalog, which is given by Urban Comics, which is the publisher. And there is an interesting thing because they give a career-long list of Batman comics you can buy. And Urban Comics also has a rational publication system for the comics. For example, there is a collection which is Grant Morrison Presents Batman, which has the entire Grant Morrison run in 4 volumes. Why doesn't DC do that? I mean, man, the comics would sell if they were smart. But again, here is a timeline of comics with covers, and listen how to follow the series and what to buy. I mean, it's smart, guys.
Right. Even in France, there's a little more. They're a little more careful when they're crafting the collected editions of what they do. Marvel and DC are published as ongoing monthly comics, although they're mostly anthologies. But then the good stuff gets reprinted in hardcover, sometimes with much better printing quality and binding quality than what you find in the United States.
Yeah, and since Urban Comics, which is a division of the world's best comics publisher, Dargo, since they got DC, they started doing original things with it. Instead of just taking the US material and reprinting it, they started to get creative. They did Dark Knight Returns black and white edition, for example, which DC had never done, and I think they did now, but they got the films from the French edition because the French got the films, the color films, took the color out of them, and then published them that way. And DC, to be able to do so, had to get the French version. So they had to go back and forth with it. For other stuff more recent, which they did also black and white editions, they used DC films because now color is in one thing, the line art is in another. With computers, you can do anything nowadays, but for the older stuff, the French had to do the dirty work themselves. So that's the thing. This material, the stuff they have to publish is good, but sometimes the American publishers themselves don't know how to publish the stuff they got, which is absolutely insane. For example, a guy wants to buy Spider-Man. How many Spider-Man 1 trade paperbacks exist?
Right.
I mean, the guy will never know if he takes one, for example, from the Superior Spider-Man. He won't understand a thing. What? Spider-Man died, and now Dr. Octopus is Spider-Man? What happened? I mean...
yeah, if you have to explain beforehand what's in the comic, it's not going to sell well. With Batman, at least, as the advantage of usually it's always Bruce Wayne, and there's nothing particularly out of that changes much from the basic concept. Of course, it might be a different Robin in there, or
four.
But you always know what you're getting.
I think it got a bit out of hand with Robins.
Yeah. So,
it's funny, but
we have some people.
Batman is very understandable. I understand what you say. It didn't change much.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to see if I can share again, because there are a couple of pictures here with cosplayers, which are not as important in France as they are in the United States, but
yeah, those were the only cosplayers I have seen in the festival. I don't know if they were part of the exhibition, but they were at the exhibition, and most of the Batman characters were there.
Yeah.
Here is a Bane. The guy can't be as large as the real Bane, but
yeah, I think this might be paid actors, because cosplayers usually make better costumes.
Yeah, indeed they do. Where is the one with Batman and Catwoman? They have very nice costumes, if I remember.
Hold on, let me see if I can go back. Okay, so there's Bane, there's Poison Ivy. Here it is.
Yeah, they have very nice costumes, but I think that there probably is easier to find a good Batman or Catwoman costume than one from Bane or something, because those are known characters, while most of the supporting cast and villains are fairly obscure.
Mm-hmm.
So that, for example, Penguin was not even in the exposition, the poor guy. Anyway, besides comics, there was a fairly significant manga presence. There were 2 original art exhibitions for manga, 3, but one was from a less known artist. The 2 main ones were from Tsutsumu Nihei, which was a science fiction artist. She's a science fiction artist, sorry. Known for comics like Blame. And the other was for Taiyo Matsumoto, which is a Japanese artist who does mostly art comics. In Japan, that's fairly rare. He published, I don't know if the magazine still publishes it, but he publishes on a very small print run magazine named Iki, which was the only comics magazine in Japan that sold as little as the US comics. I think it sold less than 10,000 copies for issue, which is nothing by Japanese standards. I mean, they cancel books who sells less than 50,000, and that's because their standards are very small nowadays. Here is the Tsutomu Nihei exposition. There's a bit of scenography. That's a large statue, a man-sized statue, and lots of originals. And it's incredibly difficult to see manga originals outside Japan. I don't know if the publishers keep them or if the artists keep them, but they rarely go into collectors' hands and almost never to Western collectors or museums or something like that. So to see that wasn't a large art exhibition. The two big ones for Corben and Manara had about 200 pieces of original art each, while this one for Tsutomu Nihei had something like 30 or 40 originals. Here is the Manara exhibition. Be careful, there are a lot of nudity out there.
Okay, I'll probably go with a smaller size, so we don't get to see any naughty bits.
Okay, the Manara exhibition was as big as the Corben one, but was on a different place. With the Nihei one, it was on the Espace Franquin, which is a
Here's
place.
The thing. Yeah, the Manara exhibit has art that is not by Manara. Here we have an original by Jean-Claude Forest from Barbarella.
Yeah, and some from Guy Pilaert, which is a less known Belgian artist. It was published on the United States by Fantagraphics, and some Möbius originals. Everyone knows Möbius. I don't need to explain who he was. And those were all influences to Manara. That's the first published page of a Manara comic. That's very rare. It was done to a small diabolic ripoff in Italy, named as Genius. No one in Italy knows him. Oh, here it is. It's a complete diabolic ripoff. The only difference is that you can see his mouth besides his eyes. Besides that, that's diabolic. That's another series, Yolanda de Almaviva. That's a pirate girl, based on a book series, if I understand. That's for a political comic he did at the time. So, in that exposition, you can escape a bit of the old cliche that Manara only does porn comics, which is not true. He doesn't even do porn comics, he does erotic comics. Mostly you don't see penetration or something like that. It's more artistic than that. But it has a lot of stuff which has not even nudity. He loves to do nudity, and European comics are full of nudity. You don't need to be Manara to put it there, but he does a lot of comics which aren't sex-based, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, there's a lot of pages here from Giuseppe Bergman, which is very famous among Manara fans here in Portugal.
Yeah, that's his main series.
This is pretty good.
Oh, that's for the history of France in comics. A large French publisher, Hachette, I think, I'm not sure, once did a series of comics which told the entire history of France. It's something that only French will do, you understand.
Yeah.
And they called a lot of up-and-coming artist at the time. Manara wasn't Manara yet. So he did the pages about the French Revolution and Napoleon, like that, and some at the Middle Ages, like that one, exactly. So he participated on that, and a lot of great artists of the time, mostly non-French because they were cheaper, worked there. So I don't know if that work is even on print nowadays. That's a very large collection. That's the first Manara graphic novel that got a bit of a repercussion, which was an adaptation of the Monkey King legend. You know, Sun Wukong, which was the basis for Dragon Ball and is one of the 4 most famous Chinese novels. Mm-hmm. But he did that one as a parody of the rise of the Mao communism, so it's a bit more subtle. And now that's the true erotic stuff.
Right. I can't show everything, otherwise sure. YouTube will censor me.
Besides that stuff, the erotic stuff was which made him the successful artist. Oh, this is probably from his best work, which was Indian Summer, written by Manara's true master, which was Hugo Pratt, Corto Maltese creator. They were truly friendly with each other. They saw each other frequently, and they worked together on 2 comics that I know of, maybe more, but I only know those 2, which were Indian Summer, this one, which is probably the summit of Manara's artwork, and another called El Gaucho, much less known. I don't know if they worked together in other stuff, but those were the 2 that are truly famous. Lots of Indian Summer pages too. Those are Pratt originals. He was a great artist too, and the most influent Italian comics artist. Those are El Gaucho pages, and look at the ships man draws. Those are incredibly detailed. If you saw the originals yourself, you would be amazed. He's a great artist. Must not be pigeonholed as a porn artist. Yeah. Well, that exposition was on the Espace Franquin. Franquin, he's not known for English language fans. He was a very important Belgian comic artist, which worked on Spirou, on his most famous run, and also created 2 very famous characters, Gaston and Marsupilami. Marsupilami may be known to Americans because he was adapted to cartoons by Disney, of all people. There were some problems with the cartoons, and the rights holders for Franquin took them out of Disney, but anyway, if it was if it was adapted by Disney, they saw the potential. Mm-hmm. Franquin, after he died, he got to name the Espace Franquin, which is a large exhibition hall in Angouleme, which is reserved for comics exhibitions during the festival. Also,
let's remind people, they have in that city they reserved a space specifically for comics exhibits that and specifically for the festival. So they don't have any problem in using public spaces to showcase comics, to talk about comics, and that's something that that is very important in Angouleme, is that the entire city embraces the comic book festival in a way that it's not seen anywhere else. the comic book festival is an integral part of the city's identity.
No, it's truly unbelievable. There are comics everywhere. For example, hair salons, which is something that has nothing to do with comics, are decorated with comics. They have comics on the front just to go with the flow of the festival. A few of the empty stores in downtown, because there's always empty stores there which aren't being used for anything. They are rented during the festival by dealers, which sell large amount of comics there only during the festival. I have seen those things this year. There were 2 spaces like that with enormous amount of old comics there, plus another one which has always been there. I don't know if that's an used bookstore normally, or if it just has been one every festival for the last 15 years or so, because the first time I went there, it was about 12 years ago. It was there. And every time I go, 4 times now, it's always there. So I don't know, maybe it's an actual used bookstore. Anyway, the whole city is teeming with comics. The fast food joint at the downtown, just by the mayor, by the city council, it is decorated with comics motifs by Ted Benoit, which is an already deceased artist. So comics really go there. And after all these years, they created a place specifically for comics the entire year, which is La Cité de la Bande Dessinée, which is a space a bit outside of downtown, across the river. There's a small river that goes through the city, which has the Angouleme Comics Museum, quite impressive, has a permanent exhibition on the history of comics, which is full of rare originals. You can see there Winsor McCay originals, Möbius originals, Karl Barks originals, pretty much every important artist you can think of. There will be some original page there on the exhibition. Mm-hmm. Not in the exhibition right now, because if I remember well, they are replaced every few months, because if they spend a lot of time in the light, they can begin to decay. Mm-hmm. But they have an enormous archive of original art, biggest in the world, if I understand correctly. And of course, every festival they have temporary exhibitions. This one was about Futuropolis, which was the first real French art comics publisher, sort of French Fantagraphics. It was founded by the owners of the Futuropolis bookstore, which were Etienne Robial, a designer, and his wife Florence Sistac, which became far more famous as a comics artist herself. She was actually the first woman to win the Angouleme Grand Prix by vote. Claire Bretcher got the award first, but she was nominated by a special award, because every few years they give special awards for artists they think they deserve the honor, but they are never voted in by the people. For example, if Leonardo DiCaprio was a comics artist, he would have won an Oscar before, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there was a Futuropolis exposition which showed all the publications, all the process, because when they worked there, then it wasn't simply get the files from a computer and print the comics like nowadays. No, it was very complicated. They did, for example, a lot of American comic strip collections. King Features doesn't have any of it. King Features doesn't care about the comics they publish. So they had to buy old newspapers and collect all the strips from an artist from 70 years before or something and reproduce them the best they could. Sometimes they had to restore a lot of stuff. They did an amazing job for what they were at the time. I think the publisher didn't exactly close the doors. There is still a Futuropolis in France, but they had to sell out to a big publisher, which is Gallimard, which owns traditional Belgian publisher Casterman too. Casterman is the Tintin and Corto Maltese publisher, so it's a real important publisher. But now it's a division for a very large corporate publisher, not the small entity it was before.
Okay.
And not so, according to most people.
Yeah. So, of course, we have the exhibits, but ultimately what we comic book fans want, if there's a big event, we want to buy new comics. With so many comics being available in Angouleme, how many comics should a person expect to buy? How much money are we going to spend there?
Oh man, you can spend all your money there if you're not careful. One of our friends, Mario Freitas from the Kingpin of Comics bookstore once, he came with me to the festival. And we got separated on the large tent. There are 3 main tents, one for the large publishers, where are the giant French publishers, any of them the size of Marvel or DC, impressive stuff. There is the small and medium publisher stand, which is very long and has a lot of little stands. Some are for medium-sized publisher like L'Association, the most traditional alternative French publisher. Some are for foreign publishers even. And there is the manga tent, which is very far from the others. Manga, go away.
It's more the publishers that don't like manga than the fans. The fans, of course, manga has a very large presence in the French market.
I don't know if
bigger than the United States,
because most of manga publishers are divisions of the large publishers. For example, the big manga publisher in France is Glénat, which is part of the Glénat giant publishing house. But there is a Glénat for French comics in the main tent and a Glénat for manga in the manga tent. And that's for all the big publishers. There are very few small manga publishers because of the way the Japanese publishers work. The large main Japanese publishers are not just bigger than the American publishers, they're bigger than the European publishers. They are the size of Random House. They are giant publishers, and they simply don't deal with small publishers. If you got the money, you could go to Japan, knock at the door of a big publisher, and say, I would like to publish your manga. How many manga have you published? No, but I have the money, I have the knowledge. No, we won't let you publish us. But I have the money. No, you won't. So you have to start with very small manga publishers who publish stuff that no one knows, that won't sell anything in the West. just to be able to knock at the door of the big publisher. Hey, I have a small catalog. Let me see the size of your catalog. That's crap. Come back when you have a decent catalog. So to deal with the Japanese is very complicated. I'm not. I have never dealt with them, but I know lots of people who did, and they all hate them.
Mhm. So,
So it's difficult for a small publisher to publish manga. That's why the same publishers that publish manga are the ones that are in the giant tents. But coming back to the Mario Freitas story, we got separated on the main tent for a moment. He was, I won't buy much, I don't want to carry it back. So when we met each other again, he was carrying about 4 sacks of comics. I went crazy. But 20 books or so in an hour.
Yeah, 20 books. That's album size, so they're large and they're all 48 or 64 pages.
Yeah,
It's not like by 20 American comics. Yeah, actually, that's a good opportunity for you to show the stuff that you bought in Angouleme.
Oh, I bought not all it was in Angouleme because a few I bought in Paris afterwards. Most in the airport, so I wouldn't have to pay extra luggage and stuff. Yeah.
Right.
But I can give them. I will show the ones that got autographed. This one will be of particular interest for English language fans because it's a Conan book. Conan,
right,
since Howard died over 70 years ago, is in public domain in Europe. And Glenna, we have mentioned them before, decided we can create our own Conan comics.
Yeah, exactly.
And we started doing Conan adaptations by the most important French authors, at least the French authors they had. So this one is Robin Recht, which also worked on the recent Eric comics adaptation, great artist. Here is the book.
Let me just mention that this is the 4th book in the series. They're publishing about 3 per year. And this one adapts the Frost Giant's daughter. So let's see how it compares to the original by Barry Windsor Smith.
Yeah, that's Frost Giant's story. This giant guy here is Conan, since they don't have to follow the Frazetta John Buscema standard. They can draw Conan as they like, as long as they follow Howard's description.
And so it's actually pretty close. I mean, it's notably different from the traditional Barry Windsor Smith and John Buscema look, but you'll be able to recognize Conan.
Yeah, the only difference is really the size. I don't think that Howard ever told how tall Conan was, but here he is about 2 meters or 7 feet tall, a giant of a man, but it's understandable. This is an autograph, a sketch the author did for me on the event.
Yeah, another thing that we have to explain, in Europe, it's perfectly normal for when you ask for an autograph, you don't pay for the autograph, and the author will draw a sketch on the inside cover.
Yeah, that's the European. The interesting thing about this adaptation is that the original story is 15 text page long. It's a very small story, but the man did almost 80 pages of content. This is the largest Frost Giant's daughter adaptation, because Barry Windsor did in about 15 pages or so, while Cary Nord did on a standard 22-page issue. But Robin Recht went out of his limits and did a very large adaptation. Here are the brothers, which are shown as polar bears, which is a big departure from the canon. And by the ending, he goes all Frank Miller, doing pages with very little or no dialogue at all, and very large scenes. This one is a total Frank Miller double page. I mean, you just get looking for the FM there. But it's a very nice adaptation, the best of the European Conans.
I still have to buy that one. I have the first 3. I still have to buy that one. I'm enjoying the series quite a lot, and I think it's a shame that it's not getting published in the US, because it would probably sell a lot more than what Marvel is currently doing, which is a little subdued.
Yeah, in the US there are problems with trademarks or so. In Europe, a trademark protects a logo, but on the US they think trademark can protect a character or something like that. Those are legislation details which the US companies try to keep perpetual copyright, since they can't do that. Legally, they do a lot of they work with a lot of legal loopholes to try and do so. This one is one of the Louvre Museum collection. The Louvre Museum, the biggest museum in the world, publishes a line of comics, mostly based on museum works or showing the museum itself by famous European artists. I found one of them, Isabelle Detain, which of course is a woman, and she did a very nice sketch for me, color. He painted watercolor, because one of the perks in Angouleme is that sometimes you go to a out-of-the-way stand and you find an artist sitting by himself with nothing to do. That happened with her. I found her in the Vesamidius, which is another building dedicated to comics in Angouleme. Yeah, there are a lot of those. And she was autographing that, and I can autograph her, and she said, do you have time? I could watercolor it. And I said, of course I have time. So she did that in 5 minutes. She's very quick. She's a very nice artist. I haven't yet read this comic, because there are a lot of comics, but it seems in the same style of previous ones. It's very large for an European style book with 80 pages or so. Here is, she has drawn a lot of Egyptian based comics, so she truly loves the Egyptian wing in the Louvre and draws things from that place. Oh, now I have an American artist, Paul Kirchner. He's the author of the Buzz series. I don't know if many people read it. It's brilliant, exceedingly funny. And this is a collection of his short stories from 1974 to 2014. So that's 40 years of short stories. As you can see, it's fairly thick, but it's not like comics is his main occupation. Here's the sketch he drew. Very small affair, because he had a line. Yeah. And the collection, it's actually in English. It was published by an European publisher, which is Tani Bees.
But which is not normal in France, because they usually don't need to buy foreign comics in order to read foreign artists.
Of course, but they actually did 2 editions. One was in French and another is in English, because Tani Bees is the actual publisher for Paul Kirchner comics. All the stuff he did is published there or is about to be published there. He is not published by an American publisher. So they do English editions too. And well, I prefer, I don't think that one should be shown here, but okay, this one I can show. But since the original is in English, I prefer to buy it in English, of course. It has about lots of text pages to explain where did each story came from. Very nice editions. You have to read it. Some things I actually did. This is the new Boulet Notes compilation. Boulet is a French comics artist who has a very popular blog, French and English, www.bouletcorp.com. Go there. Very funny. He is actually an artist which I get autographs every time I go to Angouleme. First time, there were 3 people on his line. Me, my friend, and a third guy I didn't know. So he got very happy to actually have fans there. Nowadays, there are 100 people on his line. He's a fairly fast artist too, so that's not a problem. Here's the one the sketch he drew. And the funny thing is, he has numbered his sketches since the first one he did. This one is number 25,508. I mean, he gave sketches for over 25,000 people already. I have quite a few of them myself. The comic itself is fairly thick, smaller size, perfect for translation. Hello. Foreign publisher, this is great, huh?
Uh-huh.
I think it's published in Italy. I'm not sure if it's published in the United States, but here, this one is a keeper. Boulet wrote, but not drew. This book, which was actually indicated for the Best Album Award this year, it lost, which was drawn by his Paul Azen on a loose manga style. Let me show you. Also, it has a sketch. Here is the content. I don't think there is anything questionable here, so I can show. It's the first part of a long science fiction saga of a girl that actually had to open on the soul page, which contains nudity. That's my luck. But you see, about a girl that go in the not too distant future, in 30 years or so, she goes into an online virtual reality game of space exploration, on which she suddenly became a very successful player for some reason, not yet explained. Probably there is one. So the comic alternates between reality and virtual reality. It's interesting one. It's actually a theme that's fairly common in manga and anime nowadays. So who knows? Maybe someday it could be translated to Japanese. Kind of doubt so, but we never know. The Japanese are a bit jealous of their own production. Let me see if I have any more autographed comics. Oh yeah, this one. This one is funny. This is Pop.
There's a nine side yo. If you can see the image from here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
a Pop and I.
So yeah, that's a clever use.
Yeah, you see, Popeye, much like Conan, is in public domain in Europe. That's not even the first European comic to show a version of Popeye. Of course, they can't use Popeye in the title because King Features has the trademark. They could Call If You So, that's Popeye, Pop, which is, the name is only Pop, although there is an I out there. Histoire de un marin, the history of a sailor story. And it shows Popeye. Here's the sketch, very nice one. As a older sailor, even older than he is. It was an Italian comic by Fabiano Ambu, which was published in 4 issues in Italy. That's why it's so thick. I think it has 200 pages or so. And this edition was created specifically to be sold at Angouleme. That's how much publishers expect from the festival. It was, I don't think it was compiled in Italian yet. It's still published in 4 issues. It's a finished story. But they did this edition in French just for the festival. It had a very small stand, but very well located because it was exactly between the L'Association and Cornelius stuff, Cornelius stands, which are 2 of the most famous French small publishers. So there it is. There's Conan and Popeye from European creators. Besides that, there's the stuff that wasn't autographed that I bought in Paris or in other places. This one was one of the runners-up for the award. It's Indelebilis by Luz. Luz is the nickname of a Charlie Hebdo cartoonist. He was actually a guy who survived the terrorist attack. He wasn't there at the time. He ran out. He was late. Hint, guys, terrorists seems to attack always at early morning. So always arrive late at your job and you won't have to fear terror attacks. I follow that advice. And this particular comic counts his story at Charlie Hebdo, how he was recruited to the publisher, his friends, that's the very famous French cartoonist Cabou, who pretty much every Frenchman of a certain age knows because he was one of the guys who drew cartoons at a famous French TV show for children. So he was sort of an uncle for thousands of French children. He was killed in the terror attack. It was a terrible thing. But it's a very large comic. Luz draws lots of pages, over 300 pages here. Very nice book. Another one I still have to read, but there is stuff I have actually read. This is L'Argent du Déshonneur, which is a French edition of a manga by mangaka Hiroshi Hirata, which is one of the main samurai manga artists, alongside what's the name of that guy, Sanpei Shirato. He is over 80 years old, still draws comics, has a very nice style, and this book compiles one of his most famous stories. He's actually an artist that does mostly short stories, and compilations normally have lots of short unrelated stories, but this one is a story for recurring character. But he did only that because the magazine he published in closed down. Recently he started doing it again, but I don't know how many pages he did. This book has almost 400 pages itself. Very nice hardcover. Not many hardcover mangas outside, even inside France. That's not a very common proposition.
It's also slightly larger than the normal size.
Yeah, it's fairly. I think that's about US comic size, which is very large for a manga book, but not terribly large. Only 400 pages. That's a very nice book. This is the most typical French comics album I bought by the Belgian publisher Dupuis, the most traditional comics publisher they could find. And this is a story. It's actually published by Cinebook on the UK, which is distributed in the United States, as The Belly Bottoms, which is a story of a group of teenage girls specifically, which do teenage stuff. It's quite amazing because the authors, which are French Canadians, Delafia Duboc, it's a couple, they are able to show the teenage school stuff at the same time realistically and having interesting storylines, which are counted, and this is amazing, in the Gaga page format. Pretty much every page here is a small self-contained gag, and yet the authors are able to tell a complete complex story in 40 pages, 40-something pages, like a typical French-Belgian album, which is quite amazing if you think at that. That's not an easy thing to do, and that's volume 8. They have been doing it for 8 volumes. Mm-hmm. Quite well. It's a funny stuff. This one shows the characters as they are at the beginning of the book, their relationships. And this one shows how they are at the end of the book. Some of the text is changed. It's like a blackboard, so there are signs of things that were erased and overwritten. Very creative stuff. But this one is the amazing one. It's Les Ogres d'Hier, The Ogre Gods. It is published on the United States. I'm trying to convince a publisher to put it out in Brazil. Mm. It's a series, that's the 3rd volume. Those are very large volumes, thick ones, but it contains a complete story about a society, medieval, post-medieval Renaissance society, where there is a cast of giant people, the ogre gods, which are very large humans, largest with 100 meters tall. I don't know how much is that on feet. 300 feet, I think. I don't know that conversion. I never knew.
Let me just interrupt you for a minute there. We have my friend Samuel Trejo watching, and is asking if Bastien Vive or Saint-Laville were there promoting Last Man.
I don't know if they were specifically promoting Last Man. Bastien Vive was there. I saw him. He has a very large line always. I don't know if what's the name of the other, Salaville. There are 3 guys that work on The Last Man. That one I remember. But besides Bastien Vive, which has a very successful career outside that series, I don't remember the names of the other 2. Sorry, guys. I don't collect that series. I have the 1st volume. I liked it, but I couldn't follow because, I mean, there is a limit of the amount of comics you can follow. But it's a very nice series. There is a cartoon, an in-style cartoon, in France, but I don't know how is that going, if it's over, it's still running, really don't know. This one is by Ribert. Ribert made his name as a colorist, a color artist, but he's also very nice writer. Sometimes it's unexpected. I don't know many colorists who are also writers.
Well, in the USA, we have Gregory Wright, who started as a colorist and became a writer in the 90s. His most famous work, he worked on the Deathlock series in the 1990s.
Yeah. For that Deathlock series, I only remember Dwayne McDuffie. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
And
Stan Goldberg, of course. Stan Goldberg was a colorist for Marvel during the Stan Lee era, and of course he also wrote some stories for Millie the Model.
Okay.
So it's not very common, but it happened.
Yeah, I remember Tom McGraw from the 90s, the late 90s Legend of Superheroes. But
right.
he didn't have much of a career after that. I don't know why. The art is by Bertrand Gatignol, and it's very nice artwork. It's mostly black and white with a few gray and what's the name of that stuff? The dot matrix stuff. It's the reticle work. Very nice artwork. It's a series. As I said, there was a cast of giant humans, which dominated this world. Not exactly the entire world, but the region the people lived in. But at the moment this book is passed, they are all dead. They were all killed by this guy, which is a giant himself, but a real small giant. He has about 7 feet tall, a bit over 2 meters tall, so he's a very small giant. But he's a giant indeed. He has regeneration powers. He's not a regular human. And of course, the politicians that did the administrative stuff for the giants, they are looking for him because the giants are dead. There is a revolution brewing, so they need a giant to take power and be the figurehead for the regiment. So they are crazy looking for him to make him king, and he doesn't want to. It's a funny story. There are some golden details on the pages sometimes. A very nice edition they have. Between chapters there are text parts which go deeper on the series background. I mean that's one of very best French-Belgian series. Of course, never wins an Angouleme Award because it's too commercial.
Jesus, that's too commercial?
Man, look at this artwork.
Oh, it's amazing. Looks like our chicken sometimes looks like it has manga influences some other times.
There is an American edition, but as typical for American, it's half the size of this. Cut it in half, that's the size of the American edition. Damn Americans. Let me see if I bought anything else that just mentioned. Not really. I bought a lot of new stamp comics. You remember those?
I have heard of those in times gone by.
Yeah, they still exist in France. Look, superhero stuff even.
Yeah.
The first part of the new Infinity Wars. That's actually Infinity Countdown by Jerry Duggan and a lot of artists. And this story is the one that came immediately before, which the Return of Adam Warlock. Oh my god, he comes back again. But yeah, this is an example of the French edition of US comics. They're fairly thick, 100 pages or so. Nice paper. Fairly thick paper, too. Great printing.
Uh-huh.
They even have flaps. Yeah. Nice editions. Not expensive. Let me see how much. €7 about.
So that's about $9 for let me see. How many pages are those? About 144.
Yeah, they are not numbered, but they're about 100 pages long each.
A little
they
more.
have 4 stories and.
Yeah, they look like they're about 140 pages.
This one came with a bonus, a small reproduction of a sketch of Thanos by Paul Renoux, which I think is a French artist. I'm not familiar with his work. That's by Panini, the publisher of US comics outside the United States is pretty much Panini. So those are very nice Panini editions. France also publishes Disney comics. This is special edition commemorating Mickey Mouse's 19th birthday. It's very, very thick. Let me see how many pages. 420 pages.
Okay.
Including, oh my God, so many stories in here. That's a very nice commemorative Italian Mickey story by Casti. And an Italian artist, Bonfatti. I think those are the very first Mickey comic strips where it was actually written by Walt Disney himself and drawn by Ub Iwerks. That's cool. Pretty much the only comics Disney ever wrote.
And Ub Iwerks was still working with Disney, which is...
Yeah, that's very early Disney. It came out at the same time as the first shorts. This is a comic done, let's see where. I'm not sure where. It's not credited on this page. It's credited somewhere, but not on this page. Oh, Carlo Raffaele Marcello. It's signed. It's a famous Italian artist. This comic shows Walt Disney creating Mickey Mouse. I haven't read it. I don't know how close to reality it is. Probably not much, but it's supposed to show it. It's a scene from Steamboat Willie. Illustrations, lots of Mickey stuff here. Floyd Gottfredson.
Oh, yeah.
This is the actual first Phantom Blot appearance drawn by Gottfredson. I don't know if it means much for the American viewers, but in Europe, this is the Mickey villain. Everyone knows the Phantom Blot.
Well, the Phantom Blot is one of the few villainous characters to have his own title in the US back in when Dell Comics published Disney.
It had about 5 issues, and it was never reprinted on the United States. Outside the United States, those stories are reprinted all the time. They're Paul Murray, but in the United States, those are actually French comic stories drawn by the very best French Disney artist, Claude Marin. The Disney Babies. This is a French creation. Real cute.
Does the French publisher still have a studio, or do they import everything from Italy now?
They have a sort of production using French writers and foreign artists, because for French artists it isn't worth drawing Disney comics. It pays very little. But they are still written by French and drawn by foreigners, but now just short one-page stories like this one. In the past, they did very long stories, of which the most famous is this one, Mickey à travers les siècles, which is the longest continuous Disney comic story ever.
Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating, it must have about 1,000 pages. That's crazy long. It starts when Mickey goes to that's actually the first page. Mickey goes to a mad scientist lab, has an accident with a time machine, and every time he takes a blow to his head, he travels through time.
Yeah, I remember reading 3 or 4 stories with those. Going to ancient Rome, inventing bread. I remember a story where Mickey went back in time and he invented bread. And the other one I can't remember.
The man, not exactly the man, the mouse went everywhere and invented everything. I mean, the guy was a genius. Impressive. This one, he goes to, that's the Stone Age, actually. He invents fire, since we are at that, why not? Meets Igabiva style creatures. I haven't read the story, so I'm not sure, but this is a very representative issue of Mickey throughout the centuries. Long one, too. Must have a dozen pages or so. Here, the caveman gives him a tap on the head, so he won't be there the next time. This narrative resource allowed us to have stories published on the weekly Journal de Mickey, still being published, during 30 years. There's a story like that every week during 30 years. So yeah, it's long. Never completely reprinted, and probably never completely to be reprinted. It's hard to publish because the Journal de Mickey is a big magazine. This one is the current one. It's smaller than the classic one. The classic one would be about much bigger than this one. So it had a rare layout of 5 strips by page.
Ooh.
You know, standard is 3 for small format comics, 4 for large sized comics. This one is 5 strips. So it's a nightmare to reprint that. This is about the smallest format, and this is US Comics format, where it can be reprinted. But most Disney is published in digests. So you have a very large story that has to be published on a very large size. No, it's impossible. And it's not a very commercial one because it's very, very intellectual. You know, he travels through time and invents stuff. Who wants to read that?
Yeah, yeah. And I remember the story where we went to the time of the Musketeers, and they took the time to do some research on the way they're supposed to speak and the way they're supposed to act in high society. So it's a bit complicated for the average Disney fan.
Yeah, it's more like, how can I say, educative storylines, which have their place, of course, but they are very dry reading if you want to read 100 pages at a time. So it's a pity because that's sort of a landmark in French comics. Lots of smaller stories here. This one was actually an adaptation of a short Mickey cartoon. Mm-hmm. One of them done on the last few years before the current Mickey cartoon series. There is a current Mickey cartoon series for the people who don't know. Very nice one. Let me see. Oh, French love this stuff. This is a series of police mysteries done as comics. You simply read the whole story and there is a police mystery. which you have to find the solution through the hints that are in the comic itself. The answer is written here. The French have millions of series like that, so Mickey has one too. This is a more traditional comic story. It seems to be drawn by Italian legend Romano Scarpa.
And it has Colonel O'Hara, so probably.
Yeah, this is a classic 50s, 60s story. I'm not sure the time it was published, but style is very similar to Romano Scarpa. So it's either him or a very similar artist. He was the Italian heir to Floyd Gottfredson.
Mm-hmm.
If you do a Mickey compilation, you have to have a Romano Scarpa comic. You can't go without him. It's very important. This one, it's a more modern Italian or maybe Danish. That's probably a Danish story. The 4-strip tire is very distinctive. But it's a classic one. This is Gottfredson. It's a comic strip story. Those are very long. Oh, here is Paul Murray, which was the main US Mickey artist during the years after Gottfredson. He's easily identifiable for the gesture Goofy does. He puts his hand in front of his mouth when he's not doing anything. He was a very good artist, but he had to draw some terrible stories, the poor guy. This is a modern Italian story by the couple Stefano Turconi and Teresa Radici. Very talented. They do non-Disney stuff too. Collect a lot of awards. Great stuff. Cavazzano, Giorgio Cavazzano, the main Disney comics artist for the last 30 years or so. I grew up with his comics. It wasn't Karl Barks, it was mostly Cavazzano. More Italian stuff. I think that's just Italian. Oh, Casti. That's one of the. This one, Stella Marina, is one of the characters that Casti created. It's not him drawing. I think it's Cavazzano too, but I'm not sure. Or Massimo De Vita, also a famous Italian comic artist. Recent strips. That does not seem to be Gottfredson. And this one is the Autoral comics, the Autoral Disney comics the French are doing right now. This is actually a one-page comic by Lewis Trondheim.
Oh.
Yeah. Very funny to look.
No dialogue?
No dialogue. It's typical. Lewis Trondheim does a lot of... Note the 5-strip tier. He probably grew up reading Le Journal de Mickey, so he's used to the 5-strip tier.
All right.
Okay. And this is... those are drawings by many artists. Oh, that's actually an Uderzo drawing. He did when he was a teenager. I wish I could draw when he had 17 years. He was 17 years old and he drew like that without formal art training. I mean, the guy... I wish I could draw like that nowadays.
It's pretty good. I think he has some issues with
Uderzo is one of the best.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can tell that already all the talent he has. You can tell just from looking at that. Even if he didn't have any formal training, it's Uderzo.
It's amazing. And this one is a chapter from the Glenna Outro Disney comics. This one is funny because that's a reimagination of the Mickey throughout the century storyline. You know, the one where he travels through time, less educative, more adventurous nowadays, but still the same structure. He goes to a time period, does a lot of stuff, and he will take a blow to the head and vanish.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and here is a guide how to draw Mickey. And throughout the book, lots of curiosities. I mean, this is amazing, and it costs less than €9.
Oh, that's about $11. That's about $11. 400 pages.
420 pages.
Jesus. No, that's amazing. Newsstand comics are very cheap in Europe, and unfortunately they're eventually going to disappear because the newsstands are dying and
dying, and then there won't be a way to avoid that, sadly. Here are a few more magazines. This is a special edition to René Petillon, a deceased French artist, which reprints some stories of his main character, Detective Jack Palmer, including L'Enquête Corse, the Corsican investigation, which gave him the Angouleme Award and was adapted to a movie starring Christian Clavier.
Christian Clavier, who played Asterix in the latest live-action movies.
This is Le Carrier de la Bande Dessinée, which is a technical magazine, a traditional Spirou comic, still being published, 81 years.
How many original stories do they still have in the Spirou magazine?
All are original.
No, right, but those aren't the pre-published parts of the new albums. They're made specifically for the magazine, right?
Yeah. They are mostly pre-published. Those small one-page gag comics sometimes aren't reprinted because they fail, but mostly are reprinted after publication in the magazine. Sometimes, this is an example of story that isn't reprinted. This is a mini comic which you have to cut out and mount and put on this small cover.
Okay.
This is exclusive for the magazine because they want to sell things as small as this. This is actually Spirou tradition because the first Smurf stories were published this way 60 years ago. They didn't have a cover, but still these strip things, they probably won't be compiled in albums. Sometimes there are short stories too. I'm not sure if this is a short story. The short stories also are exclusive to the journal.
Oh, that's amazing. I knew that Spirou was still coming out, but I imagine that nobody bothered doing the pre-publication in the magazines anymore.
No,
since most comics are published as albums.
Spirou is an institution. If it closes down, it's a sign that the newsstand market is over. This one, on the other hand, is a magazine that actually publishes stuff that will be published in albums. It offers pretty much no original content, just small strips at the beginning. Let me see, those are the strips, parody stuff. But mostly they are chapters. Look at this nice Beatrice Tillier artwork, man. She's great. Very nice stuff. L'Enfest magazine, that's the next to last issue. The next one will be the last one. 226 editions. It's set to see it go. Another technical magazine, DBD. And another technical magazine, Casemat. There are a lot of informative magazines on comics in France because, they publish a lot of comics and people need to read that to know what's coming out because there is a lot of stuff coming out. So there is a market for those more technical magazines. I have another one here. Just for manga, Atom. They have this magazine is quite impressive because Taiyo Matsumoto and those guys here, they have interviews here. How are they able to interview 5 manga artists for a magazine? Manga artists are notoriously reclusive.
Yeah.
It's very impressive, right? The Americans can't even dream of having a magazine like that.
Mm-hmm.
Another Disney comic. This one is a doozy. Le Trésor de Picsou, which is published about 3 or 4 months, every 3 or 4 months, is a collection of classic Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck comics, mostly. This one is part of a collection of all the Don Rosa stories. Not the first time they collect all the Don Rosa stories, not even on this series particularly, but this one is original for a thing. They published the Don Rosa story, and alongside they publish the stories mostly by Karl Barks, which inspired Don Rosa for doing his own, because most of what Don Rosa does is a sequel or references some Karl Barks story, because Don Rosa loves Karl Barks.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, this story is one where the nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, are skipping school. This is not based on anything, but here is another story where Huey, Dewey, and Louie are skipping school. So it follows a sort of logic.
Mm-hmm.
This one is not by Karl Barks. I'm not sure the relationship with the Don Rosa story. Oh, this one is Return to Plain Awful, which is based, of course, in the most famous Donald Duck story, Lost in the Andes, which everyone remembers, that has the square eggs. It should be the cube eggs, but everyone knows them as the square eggs. So who cares?
Right. I must say that I enjoyed Don Rosa's take on the Disney Ducks, because obviously with so many stories published over the years that are basically self-contained, there isn't much of a care with continuity. But Don Rosa understands the need to have a personal history for the Ducks, and how they all relate to each other, and that's what I like most about him.
Interesting thing, those are actually 2 different Karl Barks paintings. If you pay attention, you will note there are a few differences among them.
Yes.
Now, suffer a bit. One of those was sold by $263.
No respect.
I mean, the motherfucker who bought this one probably can sell it now for $50,000, and there will be a line of people at his front wanting to buy it. Shit, man. I wish I was old enough to buy one of Karl Barks' paintings for $200. Oh, photos of Don Rosa's home and studio. I mean, this is a series that's actually sold in newsstands that has only over 30 volumes, I guess. I'm not sure. This is number 45. This is mostly collecting Karl Barks and Don Rosa stuff. They have gone over all the stories by now, I think, and again and again and again, because it's not for hardcore collectors. It's for people. I want to read some very nice Disney Duck stories. You can go to the newsstand and buy this, and it will be great. There are actual Don Rosa and Karl Barks collections in France, no doubt, in bookstores, but this one is for casual fans. This is a very healthy comic market.
Actually, speaking of that, the New York Times did an article on the Angouleme Festival, and they mentioned that the market's peaking. Apart from the big series, I know that the latest Asterix sold 1.5 million, but the second biggest seller that year was only 80,000. And there are so many books coming out right now that the money gets spread around, and the artists aren't making that much. So there's probably going to be a market crash soon, and a few publishers or a few artists are going to be left out and will probably have to leave the market. So I'm not sure that the French market can grow that much more.
I don't say it will be a market crash. The problem is, much like every cultural product, there is a larger spreading around. In the old times, you went to a bookstore, French comics are sold in bookstores, there will be 20 different releases in a year. Now there is 20 in a day. It's a very important distinction. There are big sellers. 80,000 is a very gross underestimation, because this year there was a Blakey Mortimer that sold over 200,000.
Yeah, those numbers that I saw were 2017, so that's when Asterix came out.
Possibly. Asterix is a special case. It sells in the millions.
Right. Yeah, that's why I said they sold for 1.5 million. It was only out for 3 months, and the second one was 80,000. I don't remember what it was, but if it's not one of the main sellers like Asterix or Lucky Luke or Titeuf, the rest of the volumes aren't making that much money anymore.
Yeah, but you see, a comic to be viable to a publisher needs to sell 5,000. It's easy to sell 5,000.
Yeah.
The problem is the artists are paid by royalties. So a guy that sells 5,000 of a book will get about 5,000 euros in royalties for a year's work.
Right.
That's not a good pay.
And not in France, no.
Not in Portugal, man. That's under.
Not even Portugal. That's right.
Of course, since he has a year to do a comic, lots of French creators work on other stuff, mostly in publicity, and do comics on the side.
Right.
But it's becoming increasingly difficult to live from comics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say. There are people that toil an entire life in comics and haven't much to show for that. Others who get a big break someday. For example, the series Les Profs, The Teachers.
Yeah.
It's a humor series that appeared about, 15 years ago or so, 50 or 20 years ago. It was done by an artist that at the time was a 30-year veteran of comics. He never had a hit on his entire life.
Mm.
that series started selling 100,000 issues a book. That's 100,000 euros in royalties. That's a very good money. So the guy, now he's retired. He's very old nowadays. But he had his career end on a peak. He was doing 100,000 selling series. He must have made about €1 million on his last 10 years or so of comics. So it usually pays very little, but if you get a break, you can become a millionaire. Because besides the comic sales, that series may have get cartoons, may get statues and merchandising. You can make a lot of money from that. And there is a secondary market, very important in France, which is the original art market. Original art is very valuable in France. Of course, you can buy a page from an unknown artist for $100 or so. But going to the guy on the top, Bilal, sells his pages for 100,000 euros each one. I mean, he doesn't care how much his books sell.
Yeah.
Oh,
I have.
Who cares?
Yeah, I have my friend Crumple Point here in the chat. He's not. He didn't ask, but I'll ask for him because he's recently he has his own self-published indie comic, the Baptist Challenge, and I'm sure he'd like. He's from Scotland, so British artists usually don't look for the French market to get published because even though it's right across the channel, but how easy is it for a foreign artist to get published in France, either in the mainstream publishers or in on the small press publishers?
On the small press, it's fairly easy. Just don't expect much money for it. On the big ones, it's more difficult because there are a lot of stylish French artists who do work that's not particularly detailed or realistic and sell quite a lot. But mostly French publishers are looking for very talented, realistic artists.
Okay.
The ones that are regular, even US published comics artists gives them a page and they start go, this one is wrong, this one is wrong, it should be improved. And French editors are very demanding, exceedingly demanding.
So no current American artists need apply.
Some apply. Mike Hawthorne, Deadpool artist, you must remember, he recently did a comic for Ankama. So it's not possible. It's just hard because the French are much more demanding and they don't pay exactly as much as, say, Marvel Comics. Because if you go by the royalties, you probably won't sell much. So that's a choice. Of course, they do understand English, it should be said, but they have an enormous amount of artists already working there, so there's a lot of competition. I'm not sure what anyone can do to be published on the French market, but it may be very difficult. The idea is, see what's the kind of work you do, look for a publisher that is interested on this kind of work. If you do realistic stuff, your best bet is Le Lombard. If you do cartoonish child comics, you should go to Dupuis. You do very long stories, black and white, artistic stuff, go to Casterman. Do you understand? Every publisher has a bit of
Have a house style.
I wouldn't say house style, but specific preference for what's the kind of comics they want to publish.
Right. They have their own identity when it comes to product.
Yes. Of course, Dargo can publish pretty much anything as long as it's great. You see, if you publish by Dargo, on the other hand, you can expect to sell a minimum of 30,000 comics. So, but believe me, it won't be easy.
Yeah. Now, one of the things. Yeah, one of the things about Angouleme is I've never managed to go there, but Angouleme is not. I should. I know I should. But one of the problems with Angouleme is that it's not near one of the main urban centers. And if you're traveling from outside France, you need to fly to Paris, and from there, what do you do? Do you take a regional flight? Do you go by train? Is it better to go by car?
It's not that hard to go there. Normally, you go to Paris or Bordeaux. Bordeaux is closer to Angouleme, and it has a large airport there, so there are a lot of flights.
I've noticed for us, since we're from Portugal, there's only one weekly flight to Bordeaux from Lisbon. So usually you have to go to Paris.
There are more, but Bordeaux is about 2 hours by TGV, and there is a TGV each hour to Angouleme, so it's very easy to go there. Angouleme, even if it's a very small town, it's a rail network. Lots of French rails go there, so there are TGVs from there to everywhere. So it's easy to get there. The problem is another one, because Angouleme is very small, has half a dozen hotels, and every publisher that goes there goes to the hotel and says, next year I need 40 rooms for all my artists and staff. And they get 40 rooms on that hotel. So the other publisher comes, I need 20 rooms at the hotel. So the hotels sell out for the next year during the festival, and the publishers and the guys who go there for 20 years, Maria José,
right?
She has been going there for over 20 years, so she has their own rooms at the hotels. So it's impossible to get an hotel room at the festival. You have to either go to an hotel far away, rent a car, and commute to the festival every day, or to go a bed and breakfast place, Airbnb or something. You have to find a way to stay there, and it will be expensive.
Right.
Unless you are really far from Angouleme and you have to rent a car, it will be expensive.
Right.
Lamairas and Hartwig were there on a hotel room. One of the hotel rooms that Maria José got for them, they paid 160 euros for the room every day.
Wow.
They had to split, of course, but 80 years each one, that's not cheap.
Right. Definitely not. Okay.
The problem in Angouleme is accommodation. You will get there. It's easy to get there. But you have to find a place to stay, and find one, because the temperature goes below zero during the festival. You won't be able to sleep on the street. You will die. Be careful.
So getting a Volkswagen transporter.
I have only a few seconds more.
Okay. All right. It's okay. We've been at this for how much time? Almost 2 hours. Almost 2 hours. Yeah. So I think we're done. I think we can be done. we've had several people coming in, so I'd like to thank everybody for coming in. Samuel Trejo, Comics with Bueller, and Louis
It's wrong.
Michael, Vincenzo C, and Crumple Point for stopping by and asking a couple of questions. I want to thank Pedro for taking the time to speak with me for 2 hours. And if you're watching this after it gets published, I hope you could learn a little bit more about comic conventions in Europe and the French comic book market. So that's it. I still have to do my promised video on the Squadron Supreme, which I finally finished reading. So I'll get to it as soon as possible. Once again, thank you to Pedro Bouça. You can find him on Facebook. He is also the translator for Judge Dredd in the Brazilian market, which is how he makes an extra little bit of cash. To everyone who was here, thank you very much for stopping by, and I'll see you later. Keep reading good comics.